So the British Grand Prix in many ways is always one of those Formula 1 races that, truth be told, can swing either way. You'll either get plenty of close wheel-to-wheel action, or sometimes in recent history, if you go back maybe 5, 7, 10 years, you've had a few races that can be a little dull. And that's par for course with F1, but in recent times, you've had quite a few thrilling races really at Silverstone, and the 2023 edition of the race was in many ways no different. But truth be told, rather than just break down what happened in the race, because I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've seen exactly how things went down, what we figured to do is we'd break things down a little bit, look at things a little more analytical spectrum, and look at what we think are the 5 major takeaways or talking points from the British Grand Prix. So without further ado, let's get straight to it. You guys can let us know in the comments also if you think there's any other takeaways for you. You can let us know that. But for now, let's start with probably the most obvious one. Max Verstappen, my goodness, this man is on a dominant run for the ages. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, it's just the car. But if it was only just the car, then Sergio Perez would be having much better results than he is having right now. And I know he had a decent-ish race today. But considering the fact that this Red Bull is so much faster than every other car on the grid, Perez is underperforming. And it does show the benefit of having a world-class driver like Verstappen in the best car. That is the winning combination for Formula 1. It's having the fastest car and one of the fastest drivers. That's the winning combination. And in fact, this has been such a winning combination that Verstappen and Red Bull have now won 6 straight races on the trot in 2023. It's something that hasn't really happened too many times. Vettel has done it with Red Bull. Nico Rosberg has done it. Michael Schumacher in his pomp has done it. Imagine Lewis Hamilton, who's dominated F1 for as many years, has never won 6 on the trot. So that's again a rarity. And in this time, Verstappen was even given a golden award at the end of the race to kind of signify just, it was a little bit of a special token from the British Grand Prix organizers. And right now, Verstappen, truth be told, is on a tear. And as I said, he was challenged a little bit early on for the lead, but Lando Norris, once he was caught by Verstappen never really looked back. And credit to Norris, he fought really hard, got past Verstappen in the early goings, but we all knew over the course of the race, this Red Bull was going to catch up once it had DRS, and once it got ahead, there was never really any turning back. So, but that being said, and as we're talking about Lando Norris, it's important to talk about takeaway number 2, and that is, of course, the fairy tale run that McLaren had in this particular race. Now, obviously, McLaren so far in 2022 and even 23 have kind of been relegated to fighting more for the midfield than fighting for podiums on a consistent basis like they were in, say, 2020 or 21. But that recent upgrade they've put on the car seriously has made some sort of an impact, because Norris was very much on the pace in Austria, and now in Silverstone with both him and Piastri getting the upgrades, they looked magnificent. Don't forget, they qualified on 2 or 3, and Norris ended up finishing 2. Piastri ended up finishing 4th. So that's a great double finish really for the McLarens in the points. Very valuable points for them, especially when you consider the fact that the team that they're competing with in the Constructors' Championships, which is Alpine, had a double DNF sort of race, because again, Gasly towards the end had to retire the car. Ocon very much early on in the race ended up retiring the car. So not a good race for the Alpines, a very good one for McLaren, and it is really testament to how far it is they've come, that them getting or not getting a double podium finish despite now competing for any podiums throughout the first half of the season can be seen as a disappointment. And we'll get to how it is they've superseded some other cars in just a bit. But if there was one, let's say, hometown favorite in Lando Norris who ended up finishing on the podium, another home favorite in Lewis Hamilton ended up finishing on the podium as well. He finished in 3rd place, but it is fair to say it was a little bit of a mixed race for Mercedes. The main reason I'm saying that is not because of the kind of form they exhibited. For the most part, this is along expected lines for them, that they kind of do struggle a little bit in qualifying and practices, but their cars have the race pace to kind of match the top cars. This time around, though, why it was a little mixed is because, unfortunately, the safety car, and we'll get to that safety car later on, was timed a bit poorly. So, whilst they were able to pit Hamilton, they weren't able to pit Russell, and that ended up costing them probably a 3-4 finish, really, if you think about it. But in the end, they still got a decent result, and the upgrades that they brought to the car consistently are helping them compete in what is actually a very packed midfield. I can't stress this enough, just how tight the midfield is right now in Formula 1. It's massively tight, and really, truth be told, it seems like different teams are jockeying for different positions come every circuit, and that's great. You don't want predictable races, and aside from, of course, the winners, we've not really been getting predictable races. The competition in the midfield is intense, and that's always wonderful to see. But, of course, course, if you're Mercedes, if you're Hamilton, if you're Russell, you're thinking we need to be finding just a little bit more to kind of separate ourselves from the pack. Of course, that would be the thought process. So that's why I say mixed race. There were some good points, there were some bad points, but they do at least seem to be right up in the mix, and that is a good sign. Speaking of teams who were in the mix and then kind of ended up slipping down, what is it with Ferrari and poor strategy calls? I just fail to understand this team sometimes, and how is it that one team can consistently get strategy calls so badly wrong so often? Look, we get it. Taking strategy calls is very much a human call. It's not something you're taking through a computer, so it can at times kind of become a little bit of a problem area. You might get it wrong sometimes, you'll get it right sometimes. That's okay. How is it that Ferrari end up getting the most obvious call so wrong? There was a thought process that they shouldn't have pitted Sainz during that safety car because they're a lost track position. But if they pitted him and put him on fresh tires, he would have been able to fight through the track on fresher tires. I know I'm saying this with the benefit of hindsight, but that was evident even then. And the fact was, it didn't seem like they made a call because Sainz was actually urging them on radio, asking, quickly, tell me what is it others are doing so we can make that call. And normally we've seen with Sainz, he does tend to end up sometimes taking the strategy calls for himself. In this case, he left it up to the team chose not to pit him, and in the end, Ferrari, who started the race 4th and 5th, ended up finishing 9th and 10th. That is, whichever way you try to spin it, not a good race, and it's once again their poor strategy calls that ended up costing them what should have been a strong double points finish. They end up collecting just 3 points overall. Not a great look by any stretch of the imagination. And speaking of teams who are going through a bit of a dip, but for very different reasons, I bet you're wondering what exactly has happened to Aston Martin. We've not been talking about them at all now for the past 2 races. But that is because they're not doing anything worth talking about. Remember, this was a team that about 3 races back, if you go all the way back to Canada, were competing consistently for podium finishes. In fact, that was where you saw that iconic, podium where you had Verstappen, Hamilton and Alonso on the podium. Right now, though, this Aston Martin car, despite actually getting a few upgrades, looks nowhere near as competitive as they were in the early parts of the season. Ferrari have gotten past them, Mercedes have gotten past them, and now, perhaps shockingly, even McLaren have gotten past them. Not where the team would have wanted to be. And considering the fact that they are essentially Team Silverstone, the team, remember, is based in the Silverstone area of Great Britain. This was not the kind of home race they would have wanted, wherein you had Fernando Alonso struggling to finish in 8th place and Lance Stroll, the guy around whom this team is supposedly being built, not even finishing anywhere near the points. I think Aston Martin, the early honeymoon run that they had early in the season, seems pretty much done at this point. Now it's about digging deep and looking for answers, and maybe looking for those few extra tenths of pace that was helping set them apart from the grid. Because like this, if it keeps going with this, it's not going to be the kind of season that they envisage, especially when you consider at one point Alonso was probably really one of the only drivers to consistently get podium finishes. Now he's nowhere near a podium. Hardly a good sign, but it is a good sign for the future of F1 really, that the sport is this competitive. I for one personally enjoyed the British Grand Prix. Whether or not you did, you can let us know that in the comments below. And don't forget, like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, leave us a comment, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget to download the AajTak app as well. Plus, if you're already on the channel, go ahead, check out some other videos that we've done. But for now, from my side, it's goodbye.